is long gone anyway. What you have to give your children, number one, is a sense of values and proper attitudes. And then you hope to God that when they hit their teen years, when they will choose, that they choose responsibly. And that's what you have to give your children. Attitudes and a sense of values. That's it. Well, how do I teach my children to drink? You don't. When I'm asked that question, I say probably the same way you teach them to use goofballs. This is a drug. Now, it comes in beverage form. Please remember that. God gave it to us in that form. It is simply what it is. You don't use this information to scare kids with the fear tactic. It will not work. They know that most people who drink do not become alcoholics. They'll turn you off like that. Anyway, the first thing we feel with alcohol is the first paradox about its nature. It's a liquid that dries out your throat. Now, for those of us who know it all, do you ever say, here, wet your whistle? Well, it doesn't. It dries your whistle. The chaser wets your whistle. That's why we invented it. That's why we invented a mixed drink. To do away with the unpleasant burning sensation caused by the dryness and the irritation, and also to make it somewhat palatable. Now, if you don't, of course, beer and wine have a kind of a minor percentage of alcohol. It's the spirits, you know, that hurt. Now, if you've never experienced that, try it with a straight shot when you go home. Or if you don't care to, go to a football game and watch the reaction. There's some clown up in the stands with a half pint, and he takes a big smash, and you get, oh, that was good. And the tears are streaming down his cheeks and so on. Well, that's what happens. It dries out the mucous membranes of the throat because it's highly absorbent of moisture, and it causes us irritation here. However, after a while you'll feel good, then you don't mind the burning. Now, why do you feel good when you drink alcohol? What is not oxidized by the liver gets into the bloodstream, and the blood ultimately brings it to the brain where it begins to sedate it. How do we know? Simple observation. Dr. Green is not teaching anything here. He's pointing out to you what you already know. Let me ask you this. Do you know when you're in a room full of people drinking? It's obvious, isn't it? Somebody very drunk staggers. And by the way, alcohol is noticeable. I just can't buy this stuff. People say, you know, I know a guy drinks 18 gallons a day, and you'd never know it. Well, you'd probably never know it because you've never seen him sober. Did you ever hear that story? And I'm sure the Navy men here are familiar with it. The fellow, the first mate or whatever, who keeps the log. The captain was drunk today, the captain was drunk today. This went on for years till the captain discovered it. He says, don't put that in there, so the fellow didn't. So I think it was 8 years later, there was an entry one day, I think it was July 13th. The captain was sober today. Yeah. You feel good when you drink because alcohol knocks out of the picture what would make you feel bad. This is why it's a marvelous escape from your problems. This is why. And people feel good. You can see it. You can see it. And here is where you see it. Did you ever see a drunk try to light a cigarette? It's a major production. To watch him zero in on the end of that thing. Right? But before he gets drunk, in Canada, one of the finest films on alcohol is a thing called .08, about blood alcohol level. They used professional racing drivers. They gave them 2 shots. That's it. Put them behind wheels of cars. And then they had to go through one of these obstacle courses. These are professionals. Professionals. And one man was actually cussing himself because he's knocking pylons over. He felt he was functioning well, but he wasn't. And this has to do not with alcoholism, this has to do with you who drink. You do not function better with a couple of drinks. Because you feel you function better doesn't mean you do. Well, I drive better after a drink or two. No, you don't. You drive more relaxed. You do not drive better. There's that split-second difference getting your foot from the accelerator to the brake. There's that weaving of the hand, getting the key in the ignition. Where we notice it, you can see it in people, that slowness of the blinking of the eyelids. And then with the motor activity affected, the tongue gets a little bit thick, just ever so slightly. Now, we smile, but this is the way it hits people who drink it. This is the way. Here's a fellow, he comes home from work. Now, he's not really a drinker, but they're celebrating something. He's with some of the fellows. He has about 9. Well, of course, he walks in an hour and 3/4 late. The dinner is burned. She's furious. She says, you've been drinking. He stands there swaying. And he says, well, I mean, just how can you stand there with your face hanging out that way and accuse me of drinking? He thinks he's functioning perfectly. So do you when you drink. So do you when you drink. Now watch. We see funny behavior in drinkers because the emotions are now up here. All right? And previously intelligent people are now saying real nutty things and repeating themselves. Now, if you want to know what I mean, go to your next cocktail party and don't drink. After about 3/4 of an hour, you either want to throw up, go home, or get drunk yourself, just to take it. Significant is this. Please remember it. After a couple of drinks, we think we've discovered truth serum. It's been around for centuries. It's called booze. And the Latins, 8,000 years before Christ, had an expression, in vino veritas. In wine there is truth. You want to know what somebody drinks, give him know what he thinks, give him 4 or 5 drinks. In other words, fear is out of the way, the inhibitions are gone, but you're not yet down here. And so you talk freely. However, after a few more drinks, now watch, please. When the emotions come out, they come out drug affected. They come out drug affected. We are looking at goofy emotional behavior. Now let me ask the same question that we laughed at before. How many of you have ever looked at a problem drinker and said, he needs a psychiatrist? And how many people in high places have spent fortunes on valuable personnel sending them to psychiatrists who are very wise by... Well, no, that's neither here nor there. But just let me ask you, what do you think of a psychiatrist who would never dream of trying to treat somebody under the influence of ether, but tries to drink actively practicing alcoholics? This is important. I'm not saying that psychiatric therapy isn't necessary. What I'm saying is this, that first, sobriety. He does not need psychiatry now. He needs to get sober to find out if he needs a psychiatrist. How would you know whether a patient on an operating table needs psychiatry for his personal, emotional, and mental problems? You say, for God's sake, get the ether out of him and examine him. It's the same way with the alcoholic. Get the drug out. Good Lord, he's been bathing his brain in a drug for 15, 18 years. He needs sobriety to find out if he needs psychiatric care for his emotional problems. Dr. Green has said this, I have seen borderline psychoses clear up with sobriety. It is not whether or not he needs it. Some alcoholics do. In fact, Dr. Green and everyone who has ever done a study on it has found out that the percentage of alcoholics who do need psychiatric attention is exactly the same as the percentage of the non-alcoholic population. About 7 to 10% of all people need care. So, the conclusion, in the initial stages of recovery, psychiatry is contraindicated. Get him sober first. Dr. Green used to say, of those who do need care, he put it semi-crudely, but truly. If you were nuts before you started to drink, you'll be a little flakier after you quit, and you will need subsequent care. All right? With the emotions on top, affected by the drug alcohol, this is what we see. Whatever you are basically here, exaggerated. There's the jocose type. The life of the party. Very shy. Can't get through his own name making an introduction. Give him 5 drinks, he's on the piano leading the songs. There's the bellicose type. The little teeny fella with the Julius Caesar complex. Very quiet, very subdued, very shy, very diffident. Give him 8 or 9 bangs of this liquid moral courage and he's going to challenge the entire bar. As we say in AA, you can spot them. They're usually the new men with the new teeth. Then there's the lachrymose or crying drunk. Have you ever met one? If you'd like to, you put on a Roman collar and get on a train. You get in the last seat, way back as far as you can get. And after the train pulls out of the station, about 3 minutes later, some clown steps in from the club car and he spots that 1 square inch of white. Many a drunk who is very drunk can't quite focus. They tell one of a drunk going down the street and 2 nuns walking up. They didn't know what to do because he was staggering. But when they got near him, they separated and went around him, and he stopped and said, now, how'd she do that? Of course, he can't quite focus, but anyway. You may or may not get sick as you drink. That's neither here nor there. You do not have to get sick. But if you drink enough, you will pass out. Three paradoxes about alcohol. It's a liquid that dries out your throat. It is a sedative that seems to stimulate, and it's an anesthetic that can't anesthetize, precisely because it's a liquid and must be drunk. And when you drink down to unconsciousness, you can't pick up the glass to get you down to here. How then does alcoholism kill? Through cirrhosis, through malnutrition and all that they give birth to. And also, oddly enough, a doctor told me this about 2 weeks ago. He said many an alcoholic will choke to death on his own vomit. He'd be lying on his back and just regurgitate a little bit of his supper and choke to death on it. And secondly, or lastly, by accidents. Alcohol really kills through accidents. Coming out of it, the drinker goes through the same process in reverse. Pre-anesthesia, nauseated. He'll undergo an excitement stage, but will not experience euphoria. Very briefly, before we come to the end of this segment, let's look at two people who go through this process. Charlie and his Aunt Mabel show up for a New Year's Eve party. Now, Charlie's the alcoholic. Watch. He burns his throat, feels good. For a while, he's the life of the party, changes into Filthy McNasty. Somebody bangs him in the mouth. He cries in his beer and then passes out 11:30. This is significant, ladies and gentlemen. He did not intend to be unconscious at midnight. He intended to see the new year in, but he's out. What do you do with a drunk? This is very quick and it's very practical. You put him in the car, his. There are very practical reasons for this. Most alcoholics do not eat because they cannot. But it is a New Year's Eve party, and there's the traditional pickled herring. He's nibbling all this stuff. There are raw oysters, deviled eggs, 92,000 cheese dips, nuts and pretzels and so on. And it's all sloshing around with the VO here. Now, about 3:30 out in the car, the cold is going to wake him up. He will then sit up, wake up, and throw up. You make sure it's on his upholstery. Never put a drunk in your car. And I'm serious about this. The second thing is, he undergoes the excitement stage, and at about 3:45, everybody's ready to go home, and here's Charles at the door. I want a drink. Now, you've heard that. And guess what the wife always says? Charles, you've had enough. Here's where two people say to each other what two animals wouldn't. Dr. Green's second piece of advice is the most normal, natural, and intelligent in the world. He says, what do they do in the hospital? Knock him out with morphine. He says, for heaven's sake, give him the drink. Make sure it's that big. For two reasons, and they're very solid. Number one, he'll get it. And number two, he's got the keys of the car in his hand. He's going to drive. Millions, literally millions, are now being spent trying to reduce alcohol-related highway crashes. Over 50% of the carnage is caused by alcoholics, and over 50% of pedestrians killed are alcoholics. All right, now Charlie's out of the way. Let's look at his Aunt Mabel. There's one in every family, ladies and gentlemen. She's strong-willed. She can't understand his addiction because she doesn't have it. And most non-alcoholics can't. They can't. It's like me and gambling. I do not understand gambling. I can grasp it up here, but down in here it means nothing. I just can't. I don't understand it. There are 5 addictions, you know. Narcotics, alcohol, food, and then the 2 purely psychological ones, gambling and work. Did you ever go into a lady's house and she empties the ashtray 17 times? You know, seriously. And you don't smoke. But anyway, Mabel, watch Mabel. Mabel is strong-willed. She's got all the questions. Charles, where's your self-respect? He's been looking for it for years. Why don't you drink like other people? This is at the heart of the matter. He tries and can't. She's the type who wakes up in the morning, looks at her hair in the mirror, and says, part. And it does. It does. Now watch her. She doesn't drink. They sneak a screwdriver into her. Well, okay, this glass of orange juice, Mabel. She drinks half of it, and you look at her 20 minutes later, she's over there with a stupid grin on her. She doesn't know what it is. 3 hairs are out of place, and her foot's tapping time to music. And in the middle of the second drink, she passes out. Both of them drank down to... By the way, most people who drink down to here for euphoria. They get it, and that's the way they drink till they die, with perhaps an occasional drunk thrown in. It's no more problem to them than man to moon. Now, here are 2 people who drank down to here. Charlie's the alcoholic. Now, what is an alcoholic? And we'll go into the symptoms now. So if you want to take a break now, why, we can do it. Okay? Everybody here also has some definition of alcoholism in mind. Everybody does. And usually, as with addiction, our definition of alcoholism will be descriptive. And it'll be based on your past knowledge. Most of them, I think, would be true and accurate. But Dr. Chaffetz found out from having done a study up at Massachusetts General Hospital trying to find